Hey everybody, welcome back to the Year I Made It podcast. My name is Madison, and thanks so much for tuning in to this episode of Mental Health Monday. On this episode of Mental Health Monday, I'm going to be talking to you guys a little bit about courage. So courage, I think, is something that I have learned is solely in the mind and solely is something that if you have it, you're able to overcome a lot of obstacles in life. And a lot of life really is just a mental game and preparing your mindset in a way where you're able to be courageous, where you're able to take on new challenges, new obstacles, and where you're able to really overcome adversity. So today I wanted to share with you guys a little bit about what courage is. I wanted to share with you guys some ways that courage shows up, or some ways that you notice that you have to be a little bit more courageous sometimes. I'm also going to share how I've learned to build courage, how I'm trying to be more courageous, and some tips, tricks, and funny life stories along the way. So I'm going to start by really just talking about what is courage. And so this is not like a Webster's dictionary version. This is literally just, I looked up like what is courage, just a couple different things on courage, and then kind of wrote down my own definition. Really as it applies to me, my life, and what I've learned about courage in this chapter that I'm in right now. So for what is courage, I wrote down continuing in the face of challenge, obstacle, uncomfortable, or difficult situations. And so for me, I've noticed that courage comes up a lot in a lot of different areas for me. And so what I mean by that is I've learned that there are times that courage comes up where I have to be courageous in different just interpersonal conversations that I have, whether that be personal relationships, whether that be career relationships or career obstacles, challenges, conversations, and then also activities. So there's activities I've been trying to learn and wanting to do that I'm high-key afraid of, that I've been trying to really embrace the fact that I am a little bit afraid, but I can do it afraid anyways. So ways courage shows up for me is within interpersonal just areas of my life. So as far as relationships go, so I think that having relationships and having good relationships takes a lot of courage, because having good relationships involves having difficult conversations regardless of how good those relationships are. And so lately I have definitely learned that I'm the kind of person that if I have a difficult or uncomfortable conversation, I'll try to put it off, or I'll try to pretend like it's not that big of an issue. And then by doing that, the issue just becomes bigger. I become more aggravated. And so now I've learned that really if I have issues, challenges, that I need to resolve them with people that I care about in a way that's respectful, loving, but also allows for myself to set positive and healthy boundaries. So another way that it comes up for me is in relationships, as far as romantic relationships. So I have been married and divorced, and so I think going from being in a marriage that did not work out and then going through a messy divorce, it definitely puts you in a spot where you're a little bit more hesitant of relationships, whether or not they're going to work out, whether or not you should even kind of give it another go, all those sorts of things. So for me, romantic relationships is definitely a way that I've had to be a little bit more courageous and trust in myself, my gut, what I want, what makes me happy, and really just be able to accept that I can make good decisions. Just because I had a marriage that didn't work out doesn't mean that every relationship that I have isn't going to work out. You know, just all those areas of self-doubt that I feel like really creep in when you go through anything that just kind of makes you question yourself or your decision making. So another way that courage shows up is for me within my career. So I personally have a corporate job where I do human resources. So I do everything from running trainings and meetings to having to terminate people and really everything in between. So this past week, I actually had a really good example of having to be courageous come up in my career, which was that I had somebody that I hired to start working for me about a month ago. And obviously a big part of my job is recruiting. So I hired this person to work for me. It did not work out within less than a month. And so that created a lot of ways that I had to be courageous about that decision and that situation. One is that I had to be kind of courageous in the sense of accepting that I made a decision that didn't work out when it came to hiring, and that's perfectly fine. And that doesn't mean that I'm not going to be able to find the right person the next time around. In addition, this was a pretty challenging just termination in general. So this person I kind of assumed might not have a ton of accountability, and so the termination kind of went as such. Kind of lack of accountability, a little bit of the blame game, a lot of things that were questioning me, my decision making, and just different things like that. And so that is something that for me, even if I know that I'm making the right decision, if people kind of question it, there's always that little bit of self-doubt that I unfortunately allow to come in. So I had this little bit of self-doubt kind of on the way to do the termination, and then just based on the termination meeting not going super well. And then after I, kind of started going through this person's, things, and found out that, kind of my speculations maybe were pretty true. They weren't really doing all the things expected within the job. And so this was a great example for me to learn to trust myself and to learn to trust that if I am confident in a decision, just because the person that decision impacts doesn't agree with it, doesn't mean that it's not the right decision to make. And so I think it's kind of interesting how that works out sometimes is you enter a situation where you have some self-doubt around that situation, or did I do the right thing, or did I say the right thing, or is this the right decision? In the world of hiring and firing, I have that a lot, is really just like, is it the right decision to hire this person or to fire this person? Or, it's a big decision to make to impact somebody's livelihood like that, and I take it very seriously and I always try to do the right thing. And so that was definitely just a really challenging situation for me this past week, but also a situation that I feel like really just allowed me to grow personally, professionally, and to also trust in my judgment and trust in the fact that I can make hard decisions, I can do them, and that's that. So that's just another way that it has showed up to me, definitely, is within my career. Another way courage has showed up is I have some activities that I've been wanting to do and trying to do really in my late 20s. And so one of them I talked about on an episode, I believe last week, which was skiing. I've been trying to learn how to ski, high-key terrified, got some lessons, that has helped a ton, but definitely something that puts me out of my comfort zone. And I realized it's a lot of a mental game, really, just to get myself where I'm in a good spot where I can just be able to embrace the fun rather than worry about the fear. And that takes a lot of courage for me. Another activity for me that I've been trying to do more of is snorkeling. And so to me, I am incredibly fascinated with the ocean. I think it's so cool. I love the Shark Weeks and the ocean movies and all that. However, once I realize what's down there, I'm so interested yet so high-key terrified. So snorkeling is something for me that I actually committed to do the first time like many years ago when I was drunk, and that's the only reason I committed. And then now I have gotten into a little bit more of a habit of really starting to enjoy snorkeling rather than being worried about like, what if there's a shark, or what if there's, something that I didn't expect down there, or like whatever, and instead just going in, enjoying the experience and having a good time. So I think that courage plays a part in a lot of different areas of your life, whether it's relationships, whether it's career, whether it's literally just fun activities you want to try. It applies a little bit of everywhere. And so I think that courage is something I'm definitely trying to embrace this season, and something that I'm trying to really be able to face rather than run away from. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is how to build courage. So the biggest way that I have learned to build courage is to do it afraid. And so by that I mean sometimes I'm in a situation where I'm really afraid to do something or say something or to make a decision, and sometimes that fear doesn't go away. Sometimes literally the fear is still there and I still have to do it even though I'm afraid, because I know it's the right thing. And I think that's a very important lesson in courage and in fear, is that sometimes the fear doesn't go away. Sometimes you just have to do it afraid, and sometimes that is what life is learning to do things afraid. And learning to have the courage even if you don't feel like you have it, and just trust that if it's the right thing, when the opportunity presents itself, the courage will just show up in you then, and you'll be able to handle it then in that moment exactly as you need to. So I just wrote down for this one, do it afraid, fear may not go away, but you still gotta do the damn thing. So that's what I tell myself a lot, is that even if the fear doesn't go away, I still gotta do the damn thing. So ways I'm trying to be more courageous is, so one thing that's really challenging for me is I think everybody can kind of relate to this to an extent, is taking accountability for the role I've played in relationships. And so by that I mean realizing that I've had a lot of relationships that haven't worked out over the past couple of years, taking accountability for my piece of that, whether it is that I did something to hurt somebody, whether that is that I allowed people to stay in my life for too long, whatever that is. Taking accountability for the role I've played in relationships that have maybe given me a little bit of self-doubt is definitely a way that I've learned to start to overcome the fear and have courage instead. Another way that I'm trying to be more courageous is by letting people in my relationships. And then I also wrote down with my therapist. So I literally think I talked about this last episode, that we all sometimes lie to our therapist, like, oh yeah, things are going great, just because maybe we don't want to admit the pain, or we aren't ready to admit the pain. And so that's something that I've definitely been embracing, is that time with my therapist, I try to be really open, honest, and vulnerable, rather than trying to act like things are okay, or whatever that looks like. And so that's been a big area of courage, because for me that involves admitting and acknowledging a lot of pain that maybe I've been brushing under the rug for 30 years, and instead bringing it to the surface, being open, honest, and vulnerable about that. And that has been an incredibly difficult, challenging, but courageous task that I've been learning to embrace. So another way I'm trying to be courageous is by accepting myself and my story. So not being ashamed of the fact that I was married and divorced before 30, or that I've had other challenges in life. Instead, just to embrace the fact that I am who I am. This is my story, and sometimes things work out absolutely better than you could have imagined, just a little bit differently. So my little tip, trick, and takeaway for how to be courageous. So one thing I always do is, if I have something that I have to do that I don't want to do that involves courage, I will always put a date in my calendar to do it. So sometimes mentally I'll be like, okay, I need to have this conversation, and I'm going to do it today, and I'll commit that I'm going to do that today. Sometimes I can't do that today. So sometimes I'll say, okay, I want to do that by next Saturday. So like, I'll put it in my calendar to do it like next Friday. So that way, by the time next Saturday comes around, it's already done. So I think a lot of times that helps me, is to acknowledge that it's something that I need to do, and to put a date stamp on it. Because otherwise I'll put it off and put it off, and I'll be like, oh yeah, I meant to do that like 2 months ago, but I didn't, but I'm gonna. And so instead, I've just learned that I've got to date stamp things, hold myself accountable, and really take being courageous and having the conversations, however challenging they may be, both personally and professionally, to help myself grow, as well as to help myself just become an all-around happier individual. So I hope you guys enjoyed this Mental Health Monday episode on courage. What is courage? How it shows up? How you're able to build courage, and some ways that courage has manifested for me recently. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. If you did, or if you think somebody else could benefit from it, please like, share, subscribe. If you have some courageous challenges you've been through, drop them below. Would love to hear what you guys are going through. And as always,